Ashes for a Day by A.M. Reynolds. Rain fell in thin, greasy strands through the rib vault skylights of the ossuary market, each drop gleaming faint green where it passed the necro lamps. Elya Marr moved beneath the dripping bones, trying to ignore the smell of formaldehyde that clung to every stall. Traders whispered from shadowed alcoves, their voices muffled by porcelain death masks. Along the central aisle, skull reliquaries clicked open and shut like morbid flowers, offering teeth, memory shards, or half-price identities to the night's customers. She stopped before the broker's dais, heart hammering as much from fear as from the echo of contraband vials sloshing inside her coat. Hesh in bone waited there, more statue than man, plated head to toe in articulated osseum. His eye lenses glowed the sullen amber of funeral candles. "Elya Marr," he intoned, his voice scraping over her name with the finality of a grave seal. "Payment received. Terms require confirmation." Elya uncurled her fist, revealing 4 tarnished credit wafers, each etched with her thumbprint in dried blood. They felt weightless now, meaningless next to what she was about to lose. She gave a single nod. Hesh produced a silver disc no wider than a coin. Motes of violet light drifted across its face, forming numerals that pulsed at exactly 1-second intervals. 24 hours. One dusk to the next. He pressed the disc against the skin just below her sternum. Metal teeth pierced flesh, locking into the cartilage. A surge of cold raced through her veins. The numerals flared bright, then began their slow retreat from 24 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. "The contract is sealed," Hesh said. "When the final digit fades, your remains belong to the Covenant for osseum reclamation." Elya swallowed the copper taste of dread. And the vial? A skeletal servitor extended a cushioned tray. At its center rested a lead-lined reliquary ampule, barely the length of her thumb, filled with liquid black as starless space. She lifted it with trembling fingers and slipped it into her inner pocket. Her time had begun. Without another word, she turned from the dais, boots splashing in shallow puddles tinged with bone dust, and vanished into the cathedral of dark umbrellas, the ticking beneath her ribs beating louder than the rain. The ossuary market sprawled behind Elya like a grim congregation, silent and watchful beneath shifting shadows. She kept her pace steady, ignoring the faint rhythmic pulse beneath her sternum. Every second spent lingering here brought her closer to reclamation, a fate measured by the silver disc burrowed in her flesh. Ahead loomed the censor gate, tall as a mausoleum door, its ironwork twisted into the likeness of hands clasped in mourning. Smoking braziers hung from chains, trailing incense that mingled bitterly with the scent of decay. 2 Covenant sentries flanked the exit, their gauntlet-covered fists crossed over osseum breastplates, watching her approach with pale, indifferent gazes. As Elya drew near, one of the sentries shifted slightly, his eye lenses flaring a soft amber. She nodded slowly, the guard's gaze sending shivers down her spine. Her pulse quickened, feeding the rhythm beneath her ribs. She stepped through the gate, its metal hinges groaning like old bones. Behind her, the market's whispers faded into muted echoes. Outside, the alleyway stretched into a tangle of shadows, broken only by dim lumen strips that flickered like dying stars. She tightened her coat, hand pressing briefly against the hidden reliquary ampule. The black liquid inside was her final promise, a stolen salvation. Rain sluiced over her hood, tracing bitter trails down her cheeks. Her feet carried her swiftly away from the gate, deeper into the city's waiting dark. The shard bridge stretched like a spinal column above the salt-crusted slums below, its surface slick with mist that glittered coldly beneath the pale streetlights. bone torches, crowned by white flame, lined the bridge in orderly rows. Their glow cast long, jagged shadows along the guardhouses at either end. Elya paused briefly in the shadows of an access ramp, glancing down at her wrist chron. The soul disk beneath her sternum echoed the device with a faint, insistent pulse. 19 hours, 42 minutes, and 15 seconds remaining. She gritted her teeth, shoulders tight beneath her coat. The reliquary vial seemed to weigh heavier with every heartbeat, the contraband medicine inside more precious and dangerous than ever. 2 checkpoint guards stood alert ahead, their faces pale behind translucent riot masks. Scan pikes hummed in their gauntleted hands, ready to pierce flesh and cargo alike with probing rays of inquiry. Elya watched silently as a cargo barge drifted into view, its hull pitted and scarred from countless ash storms. It hovered low, loaded high with coffin crates bound for crematoria furnaces beyond the quarantine districts. Her mouth twisted in a bitter smile. The Black Sun Directorate made profit even from plague death. She waited until the sentries waved the barge forward, then moved swiftly. Darting from shadow to shadow, she vaulted on to the trailing edge of the platform, slipping unseen among the stacked coffin crates. Her fingers found the barge's data panel, and with practiced precision she quickly hacked its manifest, entering her name among the already deceased. Cargo labeled dead never drew extra scrutiny. The barge glided forward, passing smoothly into the checkpoint's scanning field. She held her breath, pressing herself flat against the rough crates as the scan beams sliced overhead. Her chest tightened, the clock in her flesh seeming to count louder as the seconds stretched. She felt the data panel beside her click softly, indicating the updated manifest had transmitted correctly. Then movement on the bridge edge caught her eye, a familiar silhouette. Vec Drusen, black coat slicked with rain, a directorate enforcement patch bright on his sleeve. His head turned slowly, gaze narrowing behind his tactical visor. Their eyes met briefly across the pale distance, recognition flickering coldly between them. Vec's hand twitched toward his comm unit, suspicion plain on his face. But the scan pikes chirped a clear tone, approving the barge's cargo. Elya stayed motionless, willing herself invisible. After a moment's pause, Vec lowered his hand, stepping aside reluctantly. The barge accelerated gently, passing beyond the checkpoint and out over the salt glass slums. Elya released a shaky breath, heart racing. She glanced down at the chronometer. Now 19 hours, 37 minutes. Every second spent was precious. Every move from here had to count. She tightened her grip on the reliquary vial and turned her gaze forward, toward the plague barracks where her sister waited, and the sacrifice that loomed ever closer. The slums of the salt glass warrens rose around Elya like fossilized ghosts, buildings shimmering pale beneath crusted layers of calcification. Here the plague had burned through bodies and stone alike, leaving twisted monuments of salt-glazed despair. She moved quickly down narrow lanes cluttered with refuse and abandoned carts. The silence here was dense and heavy, broken only by the low murmur of the sick and dying. At a crossing she paused, breath fogging in the frigid air. The soul chronometer beneath her ribs beat a quiet countdown. 14 hours, 8 minutes, and 7 seconds. Her fingers brushed the reliquary inside her coat, feeling the weight of the black vial that might save her sister's life, and perhaps more lives beyond. A ragged cough drew her attention. A man crouched in a doorway, his skin ash-pale beneath blistered salt marks. His hollow eyes tracked her, hope dying on his cracked lips even as he tried to speak. Elya hesitated only a moment before kneeling beside him. From an inner pocket she withdrew one of the tiny spare ampules she had secreted away, a minuscule shard of mercy bought at terrible cost. She cracked the ampule's seal and pressed the cool liquid to the man's lips. His shaking eased almost immediately, his breathing steadying. "Why?" he rasped softly, fingers clutching her wrist. "Because mercy isn't a currency," she whispered, gently prying his fingers loose. She stood quickly, guilt gnawing at her as she saw more eyes emerging from shadows, faces worn by suffering, longing silently for her aid. Time was slipping through her grasp, precious minutes lost in every act of compassion. But Elya couldn't ignore them. She moved onward, passing out the last of the spare vials as quickly as she could. Each gift was a tiny rebellion against the indifferent cruelty of her world. Finally, the plague barracks loomed before her, a hulking structure ringed by flickering warning pylons and quarantine tape fluttering like funeral ribbons. She stopped just beyond the perimeter, breathing hard, her vision blurred from exhaustion. The disc beneath her sternum pulsed relentlessly. 12 hours, 52 minutes, and 44 seconds. Elya stepped forward into the barracks' shadow, heart tight with dread and resolve. She had spent more of her dwindling life than she could afford, yet she had no regrets. If this night was to be her last, she would ensure it meant something, even if the cost was greater than she could bear. Inside, the barracks reeked of sweat, salt, and fever. Elya moved through rows of makeshift cots, stepping over limbs that jutted from stained blankets, bodies barely breathing beneath thin gauze. Pallid faces, half-lidded eyes glinting with resignation, turned slowly to watch her pass. The ceiling beams sagged overhead, layered with calcified salt crusts that hung down like teeth, as though the plague itself had begun digesting the building. Her pulse quickened, urged on by the relentless countdown under her skin. The soul disk flashed insistently. 6 hours, 27 minutes, 49 seconds. She found Lissa curled up on a cot near the far wall, her younger sister's slender form nearly buried beneath ragged coverings. Lissa's hair, dark and tangled, spilled loosely around a face grown frighteningly thin. Her veins were already graying beneath translucent skin, the first signs of organ calcification. Elya's heart twisted sharply, fear stabbing like a blade between her ribs. She knelt swiftly and cupped Lissa's feverish cheek, gently tilting her sister's head. Lissa's eyes flickered open, recognition slowly lighting her clouded gaze. Her cracked lips parted, words rasping like sand over glass. "Elya." "Shh, little one," Elya murmured softly. She drew out the black reliquary vial, carefully unsealing its lead stopper. "This will make you whole again." But before she could tip the precious liquid onto Lissa's tongue, heavy footsteps rang out behind her. A shadow fell sharply across the cot, darkening their reunion. Elya spun, rising defensively. Vec Drusen stood in the barracks doorway, tactical visor glowing pale amber, enforcement patch catching dim lamplight. His face twisted in cold satisfaction, a scanner pistol aimed steadily at Ilya's chest. "I knew you'd run here," he growled. "The Directorate will pay double for what you've stolen." Elya held the vial close, feeling her pulse quicken dangerously. "This isn't yours to take, Vec." "Everything is someone's to take," he answered flatly. "Give it here, and your sister dies quietly. Fight, and I'll make sure you both regret it." She moved faster than thought, reaching beneath her coat and hurling a calc grenade at his feet. It detonated in a flash of bone-white powder and a thickening resin, solidifying around Vec's legs. He shouted, gun firing wildly, beams slicing through ceiling and cots alike. Elya shielded Lissa as bunks crashed down, pinning Vec beneath splintered metal and cracked salt planks. His curses echoed harshly, muffled by pain. She quickly steadied the vial, turning back to Lissa. Without hesitation, she tipped the black fluid between her sister's trembling lips. Relief surged through Elya's chest as Lissa swallowed, the graying veins immediately receding, color returning to pale skin. But as she rose again, breath ragged, the barracks door opened once more. In the entrance stood the bone-clad figure of Hessian Bone, amber lenses burning coldly, ready to collect the price of every second she had spent. Hessian Bone filled the doorway, the pale barracks light reflecting dully off his osseum plating. He stepped forward slowly, untroubled by the wreckage of fallen bunks or Vex-muffled curses. His presence brought a chill more profound than the plague itself, an aura of inevitability carried in every graceful, measured movement. Elya straightened, muscles tight beneath her coat. The soul chronometer pulsed in her chest, an insistent countdown echoing with her heartbeat. 2 hours, 13 minutes, 22 seconds left. She drew a breath, feeling her remaining moments slip like grains of salt between her fingers. "The Covenant honors all debts," Hesh said softly, voice calm and detached. "I see your task is complete." "I want to alter the terms," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. She turned toward Lissa's cot, her sister sleeping peacefully now, chest rising and falling without pain. "I have hours left. Give them to her. Let her live fully." Hesh tilted his head, amber lenses glowing brighter. "Time cannot be refunded. Your contract is clear. A debt can only be transferred voluntarily, and at great cost." "Then let me volunteer," Elya whispered fiercely. "Not just for Lissa. For them all." She gestured around the barracks at the silent, suffering faces. "Take whatever is left. Split it among these patients. My seconds for their lives." The broker's bone-clad fingers tightened slowly. The air around him grew colder. "You understand the depth of your request?" "I understand clearly," she said, resolve hardening in her chest. "I accept it." Hesh inclined his head fractionally. "Then your final hours are theirs. The debt will be settled at 0. He raised a skeletal hand, palm outward, digits spread wide. His voice deepened, the chant of osseum law filling the barracks. The soul disk beneath Elya's sternum flashed white-hot. Pain surged briefly through her veins before fading into an eerie calm. She glanced down, watched the glowing numerals scatter like embers, flowing outward through the barracks in streams of pale luminescence, seeking new hosts. She felt a strange sense of peace settle upon her shoulders, watching as around her patients stirred, inhaling sharply, their bodies reawakening to stolen life. Her own pulse began to slow, each beat steady and soft as the world around her faded gently into shadow. The barracks grew silent again, the last echoes of Hessian Bone's chant fading gently into stillness. Elya sank slowly beside her sister's cot, strength ebbing like the retreating tide. Her chest no longer pulsed with urgency. Instead, a quiet emptiness spread where the soul disk had been. She lifted her gaze. Around her, the patients rose from their beds, blinking as color returned to pallid skin. Murmurs rippled softly through the ward, astonishment mingling with hesitant joy. Lissa's eyes fluttered open, clear and alive. Her sister's hand reached out, fingers brushing Elya's cheek, tracing a gentle farewell. Elya smiled faintly, breath easing from her lungs in slow, shallow whispers. Her vision dimmed, edges darkening as though she peered through layers of gauze. Hesh moved closer, his bone-plated form silhouetted against the muted dawn light, now breaking through the barracks' shattered window. He raised his osseum gauntlet, softly brushing a fingertip against her forehead. "Your debt is paid, Elya Marr," he whispered, the tone almost reverent. "The Covenant will remember." She felt her limbs grow weightless, sensation draining from fingertips and toes alike. As the last of her pulse slowed, her thoughts drifted to Lissa, to those she'd saved, to the bittersweet victory of sacrifice freely given. Her body shivered gently, dissolving into fine ash-gray dust that curled upward in the cool dawn breeze, drifting softly into shadowed corners. Hessian Bone recorded her final moments quietly into his ledger, osseum stylus scratching softly, each stroke measured with solemn respect. On the barracks' stone floor, beneath pale rays of morning, nothing remained but the faintest scatter of ashes.